Hello, and welcome to the Potential Difference ReGenX Generator video series. Welcome, Dr. Saab and your colleagues, to the ReGenX Generator introduction for Saudi Arabia electric power generation. The ReGenX Generator electric power generation roadmap is a zero energy input roadmap. It's a zero financial input roadmap. It's a zero air pollution roadmap. And it's a zero CO2 production roadmap for electric power generation. So in this video demonstration, I'm going to be explaining why the ReGenX generator does what it does and why it's going to contribute to Saudi Arabia's energy requirements moving forward. So in order to do that, first we have to look at the breakdown of input energy required in electricity generation. So here we have a small generator, and in order to generate electricity, first we have to bring the generator up to speed, up to a no load idle speed. And we'll call the mechanical input requirement to produce the idle no load speed as X. Now when the generator is placed on load, when the generator is placed on load, additional mechanical power must be supplied to the generator's drive shaft, which is equal to the magnitude of electricity that is to be generated. So the total input power requirement is X watts that's required on no load, plus the generated output power from the generator in watts. The question is, why do we need additional mechanical input power to be supplied to the generator when it's placed on load? And the answer is generator armature reaction. Generator armature reaction is a counter electromagnetic torque that's produced inside the generator when current flows in the windings. So if I try to turn this generator on no load, it takes a certain amount of mechanical input power to turn the generator. When current flows in the windings, now it's virtually impossible for me to turn the generator in the clockwise direction, because the generator armature reaction is producing a counter electromagnetic torque which is performing negative work in the opposite direction that I'm trying to turn the generator. Therefore, for every single watt of electric output power generated by the generator, an additional 1 watt, a minimum additional 1 watt of mechanical input power needs to be supplied to the generator in order for the generator to generate electricity. So, in order for Saudi Arabia to generate 600 trillion watts of electricity in 2030, for example, it's going to need a minimum of 600 trillion watts of mechanical input power in the drive shaft. And in order to do that using fossil fuels, a large amount of CO2 is going to be produced in the process. This is the carbon dioxide graph for the world going up to 2050, and we can see that as the energy requirements for the planet increase, obviously the CO2 requirements, the CO2 produced also goes up. So how is the ReGenX generator different from a conventional generator? Well, the ReGenX generator operates with a load current delay, and this means that generator armature reaction is reversed. For every 1 watt of output power generated by the ReGenX generator, 0 watts of mechanical input power needs to be supplied to the generator. So if the ReGenX generator is being turned in the clockwise direction, when it's placed on load, the ReGenX generator produces a complementary electromagnetic torque which works in the same direction that the torque supplied by the prime mover is turning the generator. So if we're idling our generators in the clockwise direction, when the ReGenX generator is placed on load, it produces a clockwise torque which goes in the same direction as the prime mover supplied torque, and 0 additional power is required when the generator is generating electricity. So the breakdown of input requirement with the ReGenX generator: when it's placed on load, the ReGenX generator needs X amount of watts to idle. When it's placed on load, no additional power, no additional mechanical input power is required by the generator, and the total power required to generate electricity is less than what is required in order to establish the no-load idle speed of the generator. So what does this mean for Saudi Arabia electricity generation in 2021 and beyond? If Saudi Arabia wants to generate 600 trillion watt hours of electricity in 2030, the input energy required to the generators when they're placed on load will be 0 watts. In 2040, 700 trillion watt hours of electricity, 0 watts. 2050, 850 trillion watt hours of electricity, 0 watts of mechanical input power, and 2100 and beyond, no matter how many trillion watt hours of electricity are desired by Saudi Arabia, the mechanical input power for the generators in Saudi Arabia, if they are ReGenX generators, will be 0 watts. So, what does this mean for our graph here? Again, using conventional generators, if 600 trillion watt hours of electricity is to be generated, an equivalent amount, 600 trillion watts of mechanical input power per hour, must be supplied to the generators. And this is due, again, to generator armature reaction. The ReGenX generator, on the other hand, does not produce generator armature reaction. It does not require any mechanical input power when the generator is placed on load. And the input requirement for the ReGenX generator follows this line. If it took 9 years to retrofit all the generators in Saudi Arabia with ReGenX generators, by 2030, Saudi Arabia would be able to generate 600 trillion watts of electricity with zero mechanical input power required by the generators. And with regards to CO2 emissions, CO2 emissions produced during the electricity generation cycle would also drop to zero. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the ReGenX generator. And what we're going to see is this is the output of the generator to the battery. The generator is going to deliver 113 watts to the battery, and when I turn on the generator here, the input power to the prime mover will not increase, and we will be generating 113 electrical watts with 0 watts of mechanical input power. And then I'm going to demonstrate the ReGenX motor. The ReGenX motor will produce a 295 RPM increase in the speed of the system, but no additional input power will be supplied to the ReGenX motor. Generator is at no load right now, and I'm going to put the generator on load, and we'll deliver 113 watts to the battery with a 0 watt increase in energy input to the prime mover. To ReGenX generator reverses generator armature reaction. It requires a 0-watt mechanical input power increase when the generator is placed on load. The 0-watt mechanical input power increase applies to any magnitude of electricity that is to be generated over any period of time. So in 2030 in Saudi Arabia, if all the generators have been retrofitted to ReGenX generators, X amount of power will be required in order to idle the generators. And when the generators are placed on load, 0 watts of mechanical input power will be required by the generators, which means that 0 energy will be required to be supplied to the prime movers. 0 oil, 0 natural gas, 0 coal, 0 nuclear power above what is required to establish the no-load generator speed. And that represents a very significant reduction in input energy required to generate the electricity for the people of Saudi Arabia. And it also represents a very significant reduction in the CO2 produced in electric power generation. Now, the ReGenX generator allows electricity to be generated without the requirement of mechanical input power in the drive shaft. And the ReGenX motor allows motors to increase the speed of the system without the requirement of electric input power. So the ReGenX generator and the ReGenX motor coil, the ReGenX generator coil and the ReGenX motor coil are the same thing. And when the generators in a generating facility in Saudi Arabia is being brought up to speed by the prime mover and the input energy required by the prime mover, the natural gas prime mover or the diesel prime mover or the whatever the prime mover is, the ReGenX generator coils can be operated as ReGenX motor coils, which help to accelerate the system up to its desired no-load speed, but they do not require any input energy requirements in order to do so. Once the system is fully up to no-load speed, the ReGenX motor coils are placed into ReGenX generator mode, and they generate electric output power with a 0 mechanical input power increase to the generator and 0 additional oil required to be supplied to the generator's prime movers. I hope you found this video demonstration informative, and thank you for taking the time to watch it. With kind regards, Dane Hines, Potential Difference Inc. Cheers.